I sat down with Coinbase President and COO Emily Choi just moments after earnings crossed. It was a miss on revenue and earnings, while assets on the platform plunged more than 60%. Coinbase also narrowed its user forecast. Here's what Choi had to say about the quarter.
I think it was a rough quarter for most companies. In the crypto space, we obviously had some big episodic events that happened during the quarter. And so some of those asset prices shrunk, which then impacts things like the assets on platform and other numbers.
So the monthly transacting users actually beat, but according to many analysts, Coinbase is losing market share. Is that your take? And if so, what are you doing to stop the decline?
So let me unpack that. I think there's different pieces to this puzzle. So one is our core retail customer is somewhat sitting on the sidelines in this type of a turbulent market. And we've seen that in past cycles. What happens is they want to sit it out, they want to hodl for a little bit, and then they come back on and they'll engage with certain features such as staking and other things. We did talk about the fact that there were some episodic bankruptcies that happened this quarter. And as a result of that, we were untouched by that. We have incredible risk management. And we had zero exposure to that. But there was an aspect of it where we didn't also benefit from some of the liquidity flows that happened during the course of the quarter. And there also is a reality that during these types of cycles, you have market makers and high frequency traders making up the bulk of activity. A lot of that activity happens offshore. And so to that extent, we might not have participated as much as others in the ecosystem. The way that we focus on that over the longer term is we drive more international growth to make sure we participate in that upside. And we also are investing heavily in products like derivatives, which our users are showing a lot of demand for.
So what's your take on where we are in the crypto winter? Are you seeing signs of starting to thaw, or are we still deep freeze?
I am smart enough to know not to make a prognostication on where we are in the cycle. What I can say is that Coinbase has now been through 4 major cycles, 10 years of operating this company. And so we just know how to run a long-term business. We know how to preserve cash. We know how to operate it so that we're investing in the long term. And that's all we're going to keep doing.
How much of what's happening do you think is tied to the overall economy, to what the Fed is doing, versus crypto industry specific factors?
It's a mix, and it's hard to say what exactly comes from the macro, what exactly comes from the crypto winter. In some cases, they were intertwined because some of the macro conditions caused the run on the assets that created some of those bankruptcies. So, ultimately, the way that we approach that market condition is we think about how do we drive higher revenue generating activities, how do we cost cut in these types of environments, and then how do we also make sure that we have the absolute risk management in place so that we avoid any of the contagion that happened, which is exactly what we did.
You do say you're going to have limited ongoing hiring. You had a big round of layoffs back in June. Several companies have had layoffs. I know you and Brian have always talked about you're thinking about the long term, you're looking ahead in the cycle. So what do you think was the miscalculation here? Where do you think things went wrong?
It's entirely possible that we got a little too exuberant as the market got really frothy. And I think that's a natural consequence. I think we're not the only company to have experienced that. What you saw then was that we took some of the earliest, swiftest, decisive action with the cuts. As hard as they were the right thing for the company. And so we're always going to be nimble and adjust to the market as we need to.
You did do this big partnership with BlackRock. I know investors were really excited about that. Are you expecting more of these kinds of institutional partnerships, and what kind of partnerships?
Yeah, Emily, I have wanted to do that BlackRock partnership since the day I joined Coinbase. And to be totally honest, we wouldn't have been ready for it back when I first joined because we didn't have everything in place that we needed to in terms of the product suite and the compliance and everything that we needed. And BlackRock wouldn't have been ready because their institutional customers weren't necessarily demanding crypto as a new form of asset class. It was kind of an idea. So for this to come together now, actually, during the crypto winter is such an incredible testament to where we are, where they are, where their customers are. And I think the most important point is it speaks to institutional customers, very traditional institutional customers, wanting to get crypto asset exposure.
So will we see more of these? Or are there other institutional partners, potential partners that you're talking to that are interested?
You will see more of these, and honestly, we are the #1 partner to partner with those folks, given our focus on regulation, compliance, and security of assets.
Coinbase has had a bit of a back and forth with the SEC. There are still, I believe, 9 tokens Coinbase continues to list as tokens that the SEC claims are securities. Why?
Yeah. So We have never shied away from regulation. It's part of our lifeblood. Frankly, it was counterintuitively something that we invested in from the early days of the company. So we welcome healthy, sensible regulation. In this case, the SEC has launched an inquiry about 9 assets on our platform. As you know, we spend a tremendous amount of time and effort and resources classifying assets and whether we believe they fall into the security or utility space. If this is an opportunity to have that dialogue again and to make sure that we agree on a sensible framework for that, we welcome it. And we're, of course, going to partner with the SEC, CFTC, and any other regulators or lawmakers on any of this.
There's also this insider trading case where a former Coinbase employee has been charged. What's your relationship with the SEC at this point, and what's your comment on that particular case?
We have a zero tolerance policy for front running. We pride ourselves on the amount of security and detection that we invest in to make sure that we can detect for front running. We worked very closely with the DOJ on this case. In fact, they publicly lauded us, which is a very unusual thing because we spent a ton of time getting them up to speed on the nuances of the case. And we'll continue to work with any regulators and law enforcement on making sure that we nip that activity in the bud.
I know you're very active on the M&A front. Curious what your strategy is now in a downturn, how you're thinking about spending. Apple CEO Tim Cook used the word deliberate with me, saying, we're going to be deliberate about spending going forward.
That's a really good adjective to use. I think that we will continue to be deliberate as well. And so whether it's organic, M&A, or ventures activities, we will continue to take advantage and be greedy where others are fearful. As I've talked about before with you, we did the Zappo acquisition during the last winter. That helped catapult us to be the #1 regulated crypto custodian in the world. We did the Tagomi acquisition, which catapulted us to be the prime brokerage. And so we're going to take advantage of these opportunities where others might be fearful.